I'm excited for this season of Rocket Motivation because my firm, Hand, Arundel, Harris & Sale, Attorneys at Law, where I am a partner, is our sponsor. We understand life and running a business can be challenging, but with the right support, it can also be incredibly rewarding. That's why we're thrilled to announce our partnership with Hand, Arundel, Harris & Sale.
I didn't know if I would make it, but if I did live, everything was about to change. I had to face my new life without a face. My friends wouldn't even recognize me. When kids saw me, they would hide or they would straight up just run away from me. I feel that in the end, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the day my life was changed in an extremely positive way. I am so much stronger today than I've ever been in my life. And I'm talking before my injury. And when you have an attitude like that, when you believe that you can deal with anything, you can even take risks because the risks that you take, you know you're not going to give up. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay because there's another one that you're going to take. And we all deal with difficulty, but the misfortune that we deal with, it doesn't have to be misfortune forever.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cate and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest is a retired Army sergeant who served 9 months in Iraq before being severely injured by an IED on September 1, 2006. He suffered second and third degree burns to 60% of his body, had his right leg amputated below the knee, lost both ears, nose, fingers, and most of the function in his hands. He received the Purple Heart and will tell his story of how his injuries have changed his life for the better.
3, 2, 1.
Rick Yarosh, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
It's an amazing opportunity. Thank you for having me here today, Rod.
Oh man, it's my pleasure to have you on. Well, Rick, let's do this. Kind of tell us where you are now in your life, where you live, family, how you spend your time. Just kind of catch us up.
Sure. Well, let's start it this way. It's hard to believe that I'm here today to tell you where I'm at today because, I have a wife and 2 daughters. My wife Amy and my two girls, Grace and Tenley. 3 people that I'd never believe I'd have in my life. I'm a motivational speaker in schools and with a group called Sweethearts and Heroes. And we do an anti-bullying message, but it's so much more than that. It's just about taking care of each other and, treating each other with respect. And, what happened to me was 16 years ago, but I am in the best place that I could imagine right now. I also own a restaurant. I don't know if that's the best part of my life, but there's a lot of other good things in my life. The restaurant is just part of that.
Well, I'm kind of interested in that. Tell us about the restaurant, how you got into
it. I know you are.
Yeah. Tell us how you got into that.
So my wife got me into that one. So when I met my wife, I knew that her family owned a restaurant and I knew that someday she would own it as well. And I knew if I was to marry her, then I would also own that restaurant. And I always wanted to own a restaurant, always, my entire life. I've wanted to own a restaurant. I have an idea of a Purple Heart grill, steakhouse, every item named after someone with a Purple Heart. But I always wanted to own a restaurant. And when I met my wife, I knew we would own that one someday. And that's the one restaurant I never wanted to own. Yeah. But when your wife wants to own a restaurant, guess what?
You own a
restaurant that you might not want. But now it's my restaurant. I love it.
Oh, well, great. Well, Rick, all right, let's go back. Let's go back to September 2006. Kind of set the scene and just, tell us what happened.
Yeah. So September 1st, 2006, we went on a patrol like every other day. Every single day we were out doing some sort of mission. And I believe we were going to visit with one of the local heads of the towns that we were around. And on our way there, we were the 4th vehicle in our convoy. We actually had 5 vehicles in the convoy, 3 Humvees and 2 Bradleys. And I was in one of those Bradleys. We were the last vehicle in the convoy to start. But when you are the rear vehicle, you're always looking backwards. And really all you can see is the dust that's being kicked up from the road. So it's not an ideal position. Nobody really wants to be there. So we stopped for a minute. Everybody stopped and we asked, hey, can we move up a vehicle? And they're like, yeah, sure. Come on up. We'll move to the back for a little bit. And just a couple minutes after that happened is when our vehicle was hit with an IED. So IED is an improvised explosive device. And really it's a bomb that was never intended to be buried under the road, but it was. And it went off. And it went through the bottom of my vehicle and up into the turret where I was sitting. But the biggest problem with that is the fact that in the turret is also where we have our fuel tank. So it hit the fuel tank, covering myself, my 2 buddies, and the vehicle in fuel. And instantly we were on fire. And I knew the first thing first thing I had to do if I was going to survive was I had to get out of the vehicle. First and foremost, there was nothing else I could even think about. And really, that's just instinct. You do whatever you can to survive. So I climbed to the top. But every single day when I climbed into the Bradley, I would close the hatch cover behind me, except for that day. So I did not close the hatch cover behind me that day. And I'm very, very thankful for that, because I wouldn't have gotten out.
Right.
With the chaos of the moment, smoke and fire and all that.
Okay.
So climbed out the top. Then I had to get off. And I knew I was going to have to jump, and I did. And when I jumped and I landed on the ground, I couldn't see. So when I landed, I actually broke my leg. And I couldn't see because my face was on fire. The fire was covering my eyes. But I knew I had to jump. Didn't matter. So I jumped, I landed, and I broke my leg, severing an artery below my knee. And that's why I have an amputation of my right leg below my knee.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. All right, so that happens. They get you to the hospital. After being in the hospital and, I guess talking to the doctors, kind of what's your first memory or of how that was going on once you got off the field and into the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, I remember everything until the hospital. So I remember everything. I remember rolling on the ground, stop, drop, and roll, because that's what you do. And it didn't work because there was too much fuel and fire. I couldn't put the fire out. I remember giving up because I didn't know what else to do. Like, my leg was broken, so I couldn't stand and run. And even if I could stand and run, where was I going? Because I couldn't see because my face was on fire. So I remember all of that. I remember eventually rolling in one direction, thank God again, because I ended up in a canal that was there that I had no idea was there. Saved my life. A couple of my friends found me. I remember all that. I remember them taking me up. I remember the helicopters taking us away to the hospital in Baghdad. I remember talking to my buddy for the last time. My buddy, Sergeant Montez, who was in the vehicle with me, he ended up passing away 7 days later in the hospital. But I remember all of that. And then I remember them taking me off of a stretcher out of the helicopter into the hospital. I remember the lights above my head. I can remember this very well. And I can remember a female nurse coming over to me and sticking a needle in my arm. And that's it. And I don't remember much for many months after that.
Let me ask you this. All right, so what's going through your mind? You say you could remember all this stuff going on, after the explosion. I mean, you know how bad it is, obviously. What's going through your mind along the way until you actually get to the hospital?
I didn't know if I would make it. And I would even say not even that I didn't know. I probably didn't think that I would make it. When I got pulled to the top of the canal and the fire was out and now I could see things because my face was no longer on fire, I could see how bad the things were, because I could see my hands were so burnt that my palms, they were hanging off of the end of my fingers. And there's a term for it. They call it degloving. Yeah. I could see how bad my face was burnt, and it's because not because I had a mirror, but because it was hanging from my chin. So I knew that it was bad. And really, I guess I knew that if I lived, which really I didn't know if I would live, but if I did live, everything was going to be different. Everything was about to change, but I had no idea what that really was going to look like. Now I do, but I had no clue what that would be like, and the trials and the tribulations and all of the difficulty that I would go through. I had no idea how bad it would be.
Well, and tell us a little bit about that. I mean, because I know, all right, so you get in the hospital, they fix you the best that they can. I know you have your leg amputated below the knee. You're burned. You got all this stuff going on. When all of the kind of the fixing, the medical stuff is done, and now here you are getting ready to face your new life. Tell us about that and how you dealt with it.
It's whenever I hear somebody say that, and I say it myself sometimes, when I had to face my new life, I had to face my new life without a face. Without the face that I was always so used to having. And now I had to go out into a world, and my friends wouldn't even recognize me. And I bet if my family had never seen me after my injury and I walked by them 6 or 7 months after my injury, they wouldn't even know it was me. So that 6 months in the hospital was extremely difficult, but so was the first, 6 months to a year after I got out as well, because I did have to face people and I had to go out in public. And when people saw me for the first time, every single person that saw me was surprised, which I totally understand that. Everyone was staring at me, which I totally understand as well. I even tell people I'm guilty of staring as well. It's looking longer than we should. And we do that because we're seeing something new and we're trying to figure out what we're seeing and why we're seeing it. That's why I get stared at. My biggest struggle by far when I first started to go out in public was children. It was extremely difficult for me. Like, I was 24 years old, 25 years old. I wanted to be a father someday, but going out in public, seeing these kids that are terrified of me, I think I questioned that. Do I really want to be a dad? Do I want my own children to be afraid of me? Because when kids saw me, they would hide behind their parents' legs or they would straight up just run away from me. And one thing I've just realized in my life is there are certain things that I will not get through on my own. There are certain things in my life that I absolutely cannot get through on my own. And I have to be very receptive of the people that are around me and the help and honestly, the hope that they are offering me. And at that time with the children, it was a little girl who pulled me out of this disaster that I was in. 5 or 6 years old in a restaurant, she saw me and sitting at the table and staring at me, and I could see she was afraid. She was sitting next to her grandfather, and her grandfather saw what I did. He saw she was staring and also saw she was afraid. But then he did something I didn't expect. And he leaned down close to her, and he quietly said to her, "Go say hi to him." So he wanted his granddaughter to come over and say hello to me. He was putting her in a very uncomfortable situation.
Right.
She didn't want to come over, so she didn't move. She was too afraid. So he actually said it again. And he said, "Go say hi to him." And this time she did start to come over to me. Honestly, I didn't want her coming over. I know how this goes. So when she got halfway over, as nicely as I could say to her, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" But when I said that first word, she stopped dead in her tracks, just like every kid did. And to me, it looked like she saw a monster, which I'm sure that's how most kids saw me. And they couldn't see me as a human being. Must be a monster. She turned around. She ran back to her grandpa as fast as she could. And at that time, I'm just like, "Rick, get used to it. Like, this is your life. So you're always going to look different. Kids are always going to be afraid of you. Deal with it. Figure it out." But that early on in any kind of situation, any very difficult situation, you don't know how to get through those things. So I needed time. I needed help. So that little girl, she ran away from me. Yeah, go ahead.
No, and so how did you wrap your mind around it, knowing, all right, this is it. This is what I'm going to be going through. How have you gotten to where you can deal with it?
It came from the hope from others. That little girl, she got back to her grandpa and she looked at him and she said, "Grandpa, he's really nice." And let me tell you right now, that's not what I thought she was going to say. And anyone listening right now, that's not what you thought she was going to say either. I mean, if anything, we thought she'd say he's really scary. And that's not what happened. So in that moment of loneliness and hopelessness and the world of non-acceptance, I was accepted by that little girl. And it changed my world. It didn't change the world, but that's okay because it changed my world. And she gave me the hope that I was lacking in that moment. I'll tell you right now, it changed my life forever. I wouldn't be doing I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today in my life if it wasn't for that hope in that little girl. I will never see her again. And I don't need to because I know she did what she was supposed to do in my life. But you know what? You have to have strength for sure. You have to have a will to get better. You have to have a will to be accepted. You have to want that. But it also comes from other people. So I am just aware of that today, that I do need help in certain situations in my life, and I'm always open to it.
And what other type of situations are you talking about where you need the help?
Yeah, so with my hands not working so well, there's a lot of things that I just have to ask for help for. And, early on in my recovery, I couldn't stand asking for help because everything I needed help with, everything. And it was so annoying to me that I got to ask for help again. So I got to a point where I stopped asking for help, which was stupid. But I've learned from that. And now, if I'm struggling, thank God I can do a lot more. But if I'm struggling with something, it will never get accomplished if I don't ask somebody for help. So I'm just not afraid to ask. So yeah, with my hands, there's days I'm in my wheelchair because my leg not working well. And with my hands, I have a very difficult time getting around in my chair. So sometimes I have to let somebody push me. Yeah. And you know what? I just have to let that happen. Not what I want to happen, but I got to let it happen. And I just got to be okay with it.
Well, and this next question is we could probably be here for 2 days after I ask this, but I mean, what happened to you? How has it changed your life?
Oh man, hey, you're right. It's the 2 day question.
Yeah, we could sit here forever and talk about this,
Oh, for sure.
or maybe the better question is how has it changed the way you look at life? Answer whichever one you want.
I think it's the same answer in the end. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't say that as like I'm glad it happened to me, but it happened to me. And I'm not saying it as that I wanted it to happen to me, but it did happen to me. And I can't change that. That's impossible. So I can find amazing things that came from it. Like, Rod, I wouldn't be sitting with you on this call right now, on this podcast with you right now, if I didn't get injured in Iraq. So I wouldn't be meeting you right now. I would not have had the opportunity to present to almost 2 million students across the country right now if I didn't get injured in Iraq. I would have never met my wife if I didn't get injured in Iraq. Now, those things, people are like, okay, well, I don't know if those things outweigh what you had to go through and still what you deal with. But I think this is the easy one. Like I wouldn't have my girls, my daughters right now. I wouldn't have my 11-year-old Tenley. I wouldn't have my 3-year-old Grace in my life if I didn't get injured in Iraq. So how can I look back at that day and say it was the worst thing that ever happened to me? It was the day that my life was ruined. I feel that it was the day my life was changed in an extremely positive way.
Well, and the thing is, it happened. And so you can say, oh, well, I wish it wouldn't, or I wish it would. I mean, it's really whatever. Mm-hmm. It's happened. And the issue or the character of the person when that happens to them is how you deal with it. And you have clearly dealt with it quite well. What's the message you give to the children that you speak to?
Yeah, so when we talk, we have a different message for every grade level. K through 2 is a different message, and 3 through 5, and that's different from 6 through 12. So I'll share with you what we share with the 6 through 12 graders, and for me, it's a message of hope. There are too many kids in this world who feel hopeless. That's not the danger. The danger is that they have no clue how to handle that hopelessness. And my message is HOPE, hope. It stands for something extremely important, and it stands for hold on, possibilities exist. And the longer you hold on, the more opportunity and the more people show up in your life and show you the way. So in Sweethearts and Heroes, sweethearts are those people. They're the carriers of hope. So when you hold on to find out the possibilities that exist in your future, you're going to run into sweethearts and they're going to help you along the way. I wouldn't be doing all the things that I'm doing in my life right now if it wasn't for other people. So you have to be receptive to that. But in the end, the important part is you got to hold on to find out what those things are. You can't give up. I will never give up again. I don't care. You could light me on fire again tomorrow, and I could go through the same situation that I will never give up again. That doesn't mean I won't lose a battle at some point in my life, because that's how life works. But I will never give up until the very end, until it's all over.
Tell me the story about how you met your wife.
Well, we met through a mutual friend named Matt Chacom. So I don't know if you're catching that one. I know some of the listeners are. It was obviously not a mutual friend, but it was Match.com. So I met her online, but it's so much easier when you tell people that you met her through a mutual friend, like a real live person. And they're like, oh, why did he tell me the name?
I did not pick up what you were putting down to start with. So I'm glad you explained that to me. All right. So go ahead. Well, because the question's going to be, the obvious question is because, you met her after your accident.
After.
So that's what's interesting to me, and I'm sure all the listeners. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Oh man, I got an amazing story that just happened the other day. I was telling this story of how I met my wife to a 7th grade classroom, and this little boy in the front, he said, "You met your wife after your injury?" And I was like, "Yeah, after." He's like, "After your injury?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Man, your spitting game must be fire." I was like, "That's so awesome." But my wife is extremely special because, Match, they have your profile picture up there and she could see me. And yeah, I always tell people I dated the same way on Match that I dated in high school. Like I would never approach anyone and ask them out. If they didn't ask me out, we were not dating. That's just not, I'm not like that. I don't like failure. I don't like rejection. So I didn't. So I was on Match and I didn't really use it that well, and I didn't use it really at all. But when people reached out to me, it was mostly because they had seen my story or something like that. Oh, thank you for your service. I'd love to meet you. And that's not really what I'm looking for. So when Amy reached out to me, she reached out and she just started talking to me. And I was like, okay, when is she going to say, thank you for your service or something like that? But the crazy thing is Amy, even though she saw what I looked like, she had no idea what happened to me. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know my story. She knew nothing about me and still decided to reach out to me and have a conversation with me. When I first met Amy in person, I had to like wave my hand in front of her eyes to make sure she wasn't blind because like, do you see what I look like? Like, do you understand? And she just never looked at me any different. But you know what's crazy about that? My 11-year-old Tenley, she's my stepdaughter. Tenley never looked at me any different either. So she obviously got that from Amy. Amy is a very, very special person. So we've been married now for a little over 5 years, and sometimes I screw up that number. So I might be a little wrong on that. I think we've been together 7. Yeah, hopefully she just doesn't listen to this.
Who's counting?
That's all.
I got you.
Yeah, right. Who's counting?
I mean, well, that's a great story. And Rick, tell me this kind of. I mean, what would you say that? I mean, like you said, you just like on your dating in high school, you didn't like to be rejected or failure. But now that you've come through what you've come through, what have you learned about yourself?
Oh man, I am so much stronger today than I've ever been in my life, and I'm talking 17 years ago before my injury. Like I said earlier, I will never give up again. And when you have an attitude like that, when you believe that you can go through or deal with anything, you can even take risks because the risks that you take, you're not going to give up. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay because there's another one that you're going to take. So I'm just so much stronger today, obviously mentally, physically, I'm nowhere near as strong as I was. I also surprise myself sometimes and I'm not afraid to try something, even though I might look at something and be like, I don't know if I can do that. Like this morning, opening up our pool, like, how am I going to get that winter cover off with all those leaves and all that water? And I'm like, well, it'll never come off if I don't try. So I went out there and I tried, and after an hour and a half, I had it all off and it's all set and ready to go. I love to prove myself wrong. I'm not in the game of proving anyone else wrong. I love to prove myself wrong. Sometimes when I doubt myself, like, I don't know if I can do that. Well, when I do accomplish it, when I do accomplish that thing that I didn't think I could do, it feels so good. But I got nothing to prove to anybody else, just myself sometimes.
All right. And Rick, what Rocket Motivation is all about, like we talked about earlier, it's about, it's all about, dealing with overcoming adversity and sharing your story and then sharing some advice that you can give to people who are going through some tough times. I mean, everybody goes through different things. Sometimes people could look at that and say, oh, well, you're not really going through that much. We don't compare adversities on this show because what's happening to you, a certain person, I mean, that's what's happening in your, to you in your life right now. So, but what advice would you give to somebody who's might be listening, who's kind of going through some tough times right now, kind of based upon what you've been through and what you've learned in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when I go into a middle school, I'd never expect those kids to relate to my story. And I cannot relate to theirs either. I'm not 13 and I've not dealt with some of the things that they've dealt with in my life. So you're exactly right on that. We can't compare our adversity, but we can all know what adversity is, and it's difficulties and misfortune. I just know today that misfortune part is not true. Yes, it is misfortune in the beginning when you're first dealing with something really difficult. But at some point, you got to get rid of that misfortune because if you carry every difficult thing that you deal with in your life as misfortune, it's too heavy and you got to get rid of it. So I've just learned that I know that I'm going to deal with difficult things in the future. And so are you. And so are we all. But when we do it, we have to realize that, you know what? I need to figure out how to come out of this better than I am right now, or even better than I was before, because you can. I truly believe that we all deal with difficulty. But the misfortune that we deal with, it doesn't have to be misfortune forever. And again, it comes from the help from other people. People are saying, hey, let me help you. Take it. Don't just say, I don't need you. That's dangerous. Take the help that people are offering. I know for a fact I can't get through some of the things on my own in my life. And there are certain things that I will try and I will realize that I can't do this. So I will take the help from other people. But you're right. We can't relate to other people's adversity exactly because everybody's adversity is different. But in the end, it is difficulties and it is misfortune. And I promise everyone, you can't change the difficulty. That already happened. But we can change our perspective on it and we can change how we're looking at it. The day I was injured doesn't mean it's a good day. Doesn't mean it was a really amazing day in my life. It means I found amazing things that came from it. That's all. And that's how I can relate my story with other people's stories. You didn't want it to happen, but it did. And now, how do you get through it?
But that question, like you said, that you change your perspective or the way you look at it. How do you do that? How do you change your perspective?
Well, I mean, do I want to live my life, the rest of my life, thinking that day that happened, what happened to me in Iraq is something awful? I don't. I don't want to live in that world of negativity and awful world. I don't want to live my life that explosion ruined everything. And I don't have to, because my mind is still there and I get to make choices. And those are the choices that we can make. So a lot of times we just have to get to the point where we say, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this thing in my life ruining my life. I want to talk to you. I want to tell you that your life does not have to be ruined. Your life can be better than it was before that thing happened to you. It can be better. You just have to look at it differently. And no, it doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't happen the moment I say that to somebody. That's impossible. It takes time. But that's where Hold On Possibilities Exist fits in. You got to be patient.
Yeah.
And you can't just sit there. You can't just sit back and wait for something to happen. You have to do something. And like I always say, if I sat home after my injury, locked myself in a dark room, everyone in the world would understand. They'd be like, oh man, Rick has dealt with a lot and it's okay. He's dealing probably post-traumatic stress and dealing with all this stuff. And well, thankfully, they're not me and I don't want to live like that. So I had to get out there and I had to do things. I had to put myself in uncomfortable situations to find out that there are so many amazing opportunities out there.
Hey, and Rick, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, like an organization to have you come speak or just want to, follow you, I don't know if you're on social media or what, but how could they do it?
Yeah, so sweetheartsandheroes.com is our website, and we have a forum where you can contact us through there for speaking. rickyarosh.net is another one that somebody could reach out to. It's rickyarosh.net. And also we have all of our social media with Sweethearts and Heroes and also anything under Rick Yarosh. So any of those we monitor often, so they can reach out in any way there.
Okay, awesome. Well, Rick, man, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I listened to some of the stuff you say, and it really, although different type things like we said, but I feel so much of what you say with how I go through my life too, and it's just a pleasure listening to you actually express the stuff that goes through my mind on a daily basis.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. And honestly, I hope I know you caught it, and I hope the people listening are catching it too, but I am extremely happy. Yeah. I am an extremely happy person. But I don't, and in the end, it's because I choose to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important point to make, but I tell you, Rick, what we always do is we give the guest the parting shot. So kind of dig deep, maybe something we hadn't already talked about, give us some great advice to take us home.
All right. So, you know what? We all struggle. That is a fact. There's no avoiding struggle in this world. There's no avoiding difficulty in this world. But what we have to do is understand that the struggle and the difficulty that we have, that we deal with, can be some of the most amazing things that have ever happened to us. if we choose to look at it that way. I mentioned perspective a bunch of times today, and that's what it comes down to. Somebody else's perspective on what happened to me is much different than my perspective on it, thankfully, because a lot of people will look at me and they will say, man, I'm glad that never happened to me. Well, today I'm saying to you that it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So when you deal with those difficult things, just recognize that amazing things are coming. And those 4 letters in that word, I believe the most important word in this world, that hope, HOPE, hold on, possibilities exist. Please hold on. You will find out that opportunities are out there, and the possibilities that exist, they're amazing.
All right. Rick, thanks so much, man. That was great stuff to take us home. And man, thanks for taking the time to come on.
I appreciate you very much, Rod. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. What a great episode with Rick Yarosh. It's hard to believe that somebody would go through what he did. You know, it's the injuries are one thing, but when you're burned like that, especially in your face, and then your whole identity is different, and then you got to deal with that. It's, you know, how he's done that, and the positive spin he puts on it, and it's not just spin, it's the way he's living his life. I mean, it's just incredible. We were just so fortunate to have him on here and have him tell his story. Next week, tune in. We'll have another great episode of Rocket Motivation. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, my law firm, Hand, Arundel, Harris & Self, with offices in Mobile, Birmingham, Fairhope, and Athens, Alabama, and Destin, Panama City Beach, and Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. We are uniquely situated among the Southeast major law firms to provide legal direction to clients throughout Alabama and Northwest Florida. So whether you're looking for legal advice, litigators, or simply a partner you can trust, Hand, Arundel, Harris & Self is there for you. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out Hand, Arundel, Harris & Self for all your legal needs. Visit our website at handfirm.com. And if you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cate, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.